right, I am Ginger Kopka. I graduated in 1999, and one of my neighbors was in charge of the butterfly garden at Roper, and when he knew that I had finished my master gardening class, he said, come on out to the butterfly garden. So I did, and it was probably towards fall because we did our 40 hours after we graduated. So I went there, and then he decided to move out of state, and he asked which of us wanted to be in charge of the butterfly garden. Of course I said, no, not me. So this other girl, what did I say his name was? Tom Wagner?
No, you didn't.
That was Tom Wagner. And the girl that volunteered, I think she was in my class also, and I'm thinking her name might have been Karen with red hair. So I'll call her Karen with red hair. Karen was good at it, very good, except that all of a sudden one day, and it was like maybe a month and a half or so, she completely disappeared. She quit Master Gardeners. She just left us in the butterfly garden. So someone says, Ginger, will you do it then? And I said, okay. So I became the coordinator of the butterfly garden back in 1999. Daryl Harrison was the director of Roper Mountain at that time, and Greg Cornwell was the director of education. They were always very helpful. Tim Taylor was one of the instructors, and he heard us in the office area there one day planning what we were going to do in the garden, and he came and just walked over and started saying, hey, anything I can do, I'd be glad to help. So I found that they were so helpful. They told me to dream of what I wanted in the garden. And it wasn't just me. I'll tell you later all the people that were with me. But we dreamed big. And the first thing we said, we cannot continue just watering with a hose, that we had to attach a long distance to water our plants. So getting an irrigation system was very important. Well, Phoebe Blackstone checked on us every once in a while. She came out and I says, Phoebe, they're saying that up on this mountain, we just can't get an irrigation system that would work. And she says, well, I'll send Charles. That was her husband. He is an engineer. So he came out and he looked, he goes, we can do it. So he helped us get an irrigation system. And we also had a drip irrigation system. One of the first things we wanted done was there was a row of yews, which were hedges, along the driveway there next to the butterfly garden. They sucked all the energy out of the plants, and we couldn't grow anything in that bed. So I forget the name of the superintendent of schools at that time, because he left, and his son was an Eagle Scout, and the director loved Roper Mountain, so he had his son come out and do an Eagle Scout project of removing those hedges, and they got old oak wood that they had somewhere, and they built one of those Carolina fences in the front, and we had a lot more light coming into the garden, and it just looked a lot better. I worked in the garden for 13 years, and all that while we had second Saturday programs. Instead of just being there to be like a security guard, we decided to have these programs, and we tried to make them fit in with the theme of the second Saturday that Roper Mountain used to have. One of my favorites was Halloween, and we would put orange pumpkins and scarecrows and just decorated for Halloween, and it was very enjoyable. The other one was November was our harvest month, and we would let the kids and we ourselves collected seeds from the garden of the different flowers and things, and we put them in, we made little butterfly envelopes, and when they came to Roper Mountain for second Saturday, they got to choose whatever seeds they wanted to take home. In the summer, we taught programs because Roper makes money in the summer by having nature classes, and one of them was to come in the butterfly garden, and we would let them hold the caterpillars and talk about the 4 stages of the butterfly. And then we started, towards the end of the time I was there, we started tagging monarchs in the fall. Roper would buy us chrysalises, let them emerge or eclose from the chrysalis, and then we would put them in a big cage, and like every hour we would release so many, and we would let the children hold, we would press the tag on, let the child hold it, identify it as a male or female, and then we released it. We had such a crowd, just everybody, you know, wanted a turn to do it, and we did it for every hour on the hour when we had second Saturday that time. Helen Ellis used to be a school teacher in Greenville, and she and I would have a tea party, a butterfly tea party, and people, by being members of the association, they signed up to come to it was for little girls, and we would have the tea party in the shelter up there in the butterfly garden. It was so much fun. We made butterfly tea, and they would have, which was tea with lemons in it and mint. Helen Chandler shared her mint, and we had butterfly tea and some cookies and things, and I talked about, of course, the stages of the butterfly and releasing them, and Helen would tell stories about years when the monarchs would come to the garden, and one year they all perched in the trees around Roper, and she just told stories of things that happened in the we dreamed about having a recirculating stream in the garden. We had a dry stream bed, but we wanted to turn it into a recirculating stream. Well, when Roper knew that, what they do is they keep it in the back of their head about these projects, and then they have to look for money before they can say, okay, we'll do it. But one day they came and said, we got the money. And oh, that was so exciting. We got Ronnie Abbott to build the stream, and Steve Luck was, that's a master gardener, was kind of overlooked them and was a real help. So that made, I think it really added to the butterfly garden. You heard that gurgle of the stream, and it drew butterflies and insects. Then we needed a shed. We had to carry all our equipment every night to the back somewhere, but another Boy Scout project, and we got a shed put on our space. Then we had a new director there. Bill Bradshaw came in, and someone at the Fine Arts Center wanted to do him a favor someday. And what it ended up being was they would do a garden, make garden sculptures for in the butterfly garden. So they came out and it was like a class on how to market their quality as an artist. So they came out and looked to see what we had there, and they went back to the classroom and drew sketches, and we went out there to see the sketches and picked the one we liked, and then they made it. They're those butterfly sculptures that look like ceramic, like clay pot material, and they had the life of the butterfly stages on them. So then people came to the butterfly garden and they would always ask us questions. What's this? What's that? So another project was to get host plant signs for the butterfly garden. So that was kind of an expensive project too, and the Master Gardeners and Roper put in money to buy that. Another thing that we did, I had seen probably on the computer, this beautiful blue metal butterfly bench. And I told Roper I would love to have one of those, but the price was like $1,000. So one day in Greenville, a woman committed suicide downtown by jumping off a building. And her family came to Roper and said, we want to make a donation in her memory. Mm-hmm. And they must have known it was $1,000 because they told me, pick out the butterfly bench that you want. And so we did, and it arrived and we set it up, and Evelyn Watkins placed it at a nice spot in the garden. And one day a man stopped in the garden and he was looking at the bench, and I said, can I help you? Do you have a question? He goes, yes. He says, I think that's my sister's bench that we donated to the garden. And so we learned that that's how we got it, because he told the story of his sister who died. I just wanted to mention the people that worked with me all those years. Of course, I went into the class and I gave a little butterfly lesson and then encouraged people, like the new students, to come out and work in the butterfly garden. I think Susie Seagrave did the same thing. She went in and talked about her seeds and vegetables, but that really helped us to get volunteers in the butterfly garden. But there were some people that stayed in the butterfly garden for years, and I think I need to mention some of their names, because we've remained friends through all these years, and they stayed for years. And the butterfly garden was not one person, it was this group of people. Virginia Packard, she's one of the ones that raised butterflies. Jane Thompson, Evelyn Watkins, Bobby and Andy Anderson, Mary Shera, Melanie Bright raised caterpillars, Karen Matusik, Chuck Cholene, it's good to have a man on with us, Ann Kaplan, Ann Funderburk, Ron Adams, Callie Toadvin, Steve Luck, Peggy Saxon, Elise Earp, Judy Ferrone, Bonnie Gillick, and then when Bill Bradshaw retired, he and his wife Dee came out and worked in the butterfly garden with us for a long time. Okay. In the butterfly garden, we planted host and nectar plants. A nectar plant is the most important plant because it's the plant that butterflies lay their eggs on. The nectar plants are flowers that they sip nectar from. So some examples of butterfly nectar plants would be, of course, butterfly bush. Zinnias are a favorite. Echinaceas. Sedum in the fall. Pansies. Salvias. There was one Mexican sage which blooms in the fall. And I stopped at Roper yesterday, and it's still in its glory. It takes a whole bed, and it's still there and doing well. And it usually doesn't do too well in Greenville. So some of the nectar plants, or the host plants, would be like pipevine for the pipevine swallowtail, and we had lots of those. Of course, milkweed for the monarchs, pansies and violas for the fritillaries.
So I had the pleasure of being able to attend the very first Greenville Master Gardener Symposium. I remember that Deborah Schneider was a very, very big part of leading that symposium. It was held at Greenville Tech in a conference room. I think it was sort of amphitheater-like space. It was an exciting day. It was on a Saturday, but it was such a great success. We realized we were very limited with space at that. I'm thinking it was 50, maybe 75 people who attended that first symposium. So one of our members at the time, Evelyn Onofrio, was working at Furman, and she told us about a new space that was just opening, the Yance Center. And we all went and looked at that new space, and it was very elegant, gave us a lot more room. So we moved over there for our symposiums. At that time, we started having a couple vendors, just a couple vendors. We had expanded space. We thought we were in heaven. But once again, our people, the word spread, more and more people wanted to attend. So at that point, we moved to the convention center, or the TD Center as it's called. I believe it's called the TD Center. Maybe it's changed the name, but located off Pleasantburg near the Greenville downtown airport. We moved over there. That gave us really a lot more space. We started being able to have really big screens for presenting and projecting pictures from our presenters. We expanded the space to 350 people, had more space for vendors. The popularity with that grew so much, we actually even acquired a space, a room to have vendors in. That was a great success. Also, lunches, that was a key thing. When we moved to the convention center, they were able to provide us a space for dining, that we could actually sit down instead of having to either sit in the seat that we had been sitting in all day for the presentations, or finding a space on outside. So we've had some great speakers over the years. A lot of that can be, most of it can be contributed to Marion St. Clair and her network of people that she's presented.
So I moved to Greenville in the year 2000, in the fall of 2000, and joined joined the Greenville Master Gardeners when I moved here. One of the things that I remember that I was a little bit disappointed in is that when I moved here previously, the Master Gardeners in Greenville had always done a house tour for their fundraiser, but they had decided that they were going to do a symposium instead. And I had done symposiums, worked on symposiums with the Midlands Master Gardener Association for many years. So I immediately joined that committee, and the first meeting that I can find on my calendar was in March of 2001 to attend a meeting with the Greenville Master Gardeners. So I got to know a lot of Greenville Master Gardeners by being on that committee, and Terry Gentry in particular. Deb Schneider was very involved, and it was a wonderful experience to build the symposium in Greenville. When we began the symposium in Greenville, they were held at Furman University. I remember everybody was really excited about getting that venue, and because we had some built-in clout there to be at such a prestigious university. And I remember we started out with a pretty good attendance the very first year. It was very popular, really got a quick start, and it really wasn't that long before we had filled every seat. And I think my memory is it was maybe 7 or 8 years, and we had to look for a bigger venue, and that's when we moved the symposium to the convention center. So the one story that I really want to tell you is about when we hired Corey Tanner as the Master Gardener Coordinator for Greenville County. Tim Davis was with Clemson, and he was the one, excuse me, who was in charge of the interviews. And I had known Tim from working in Lexington County, and he asked me to be on the committee that would do the hiring. And my memory is it was Tim and myself and one or two other people. And I very clearly remember Corey's interview. He came in and he had a video or a slideshow of himself, and he talked about being a lifelong gardener. He had gotten his undergraduate degree at Clemson, and he had worked in a plant-based horticulture industry for a short period of time, and then he was applying to work for Clemson Extension. And he said that was his lifelong dream, to work for Clemson. And in this slideshow, he showed pictures of when he was a young boy working in the garden, and he talked about what an inspiration that his family had been. I believe it was his grandparents, but also his parents, gardening, and how much he would really love that job. And I just remember walking away from that and saying, that has to be our guy. That has to be our guy. I remember that we used to have a spring luncheon. I remember that it was typically held in restaurants. And I think that maybe morphed into our winter luncheon, which we have now. But it was a spring luncheon, and my memory is it was held in March or April. And that was always a lot of fun. And I do remember enjoying meeting in people's homes. When I first began, however, my memory is that there were nighttime meetings that were held at the Buncombe Street United Methodist Church downtown in a Sunday school classroom. And during the daytime, we met at the Open Book, which was a bookstore off of Pleasantburg Drive. And one of the very first meetings that I remember attending, Jane McCutcheon was the speaker, and she was talking about herbs. And she was, when everybody came in, she was chopping up those herbs so that the room was just filled with all these wonderful aromas of the herbs. And I couldn't wait for her to get started with that talk. And it was a great lesson to me as somebody who enjoyed giving talks, that you need to appeal to all the senses, every sense that you can, when you're preparing to do something to really get people engaged with what you're talking about. And Jane is a great speaker. We also hosted in 2007 the statewide Master Gardener Conference in Greenville, and that was also very exciting. It was held at the Hyatt on Main Street. We had excellent attendance from across the state. I had worked with some of the connections that I had in the Midlands area of the state to locate Master Gardener presidents all over the state of South Carolina, because that knowledge wasn't readily available to us. And so at the conference, we had a good number of people from Florence. We had a lot of people from the Charleston area, not Charleston in particular, but the Low Country area. And of course, lots of people from the Midlands. We had people from the Clemson Master Gardener Group. We had and other locations from around the state. But it was really exciting. Our very special guest and speaker was Roger Swain, who was well known because of the Victory Garden on PBS. And he was a lot of fun. He was just as good-natured in person as he was on the television show. And he was a big flirt, which was a surprise. And any woman who came along, he was asking them would they marry him. So I remember that. And our other big speaker was Rick Dark, who's still a very busy garden writer and very well known now. and he did an excellent presentation too. And then we had a lot of concurrent sessions, and they were all done by some of our extension agents from all over the state. I know Corey did a couple of the concurrent sessions, and they proved to be very popular. But it's just a wonderful memory, making friends with people that are involved in Master Gardener volunteer work all over the state.
Crystal Campaignan, who is a physical therapist by trade, joined me as co-chairs of the garden, and we remained co-chairs until 2009. At that point, to get people to come and to enjoy working at the garden, again in 108-degree weather, I decided to give basically a gift in the form of a handout for every time we worked. Sometimes it was just information that I had taken out of a magazine. A lot of the times it was information I had written, but it was always proactive and always about something that we were doing in the garden. In 2004, the description in our directory was rewritten to add to it that on the first Saturday of every month from March to November, we were including Hands-on Greenville. And I think Hands-on Greenville may not even exist any longer, but when we first moved here, it was a very active group of, does it?
It does.
Then it does still exist, of young, like executive types that volunteered on the weekend to work on a variety of projects, and they had one big work day a year, but they were supposed to come to our garden and work every first weekend. So now we're up to 21 weekends a year that we're working in the garden. Hands-on Greenville, as good as they were, it became a real dating site. So they finally paired off and kind of disappeared, and we lost their help. But that was filled in by a number of church groups that contacted the director of the soup kitchen directly, and scheduled a time to come and work, and also high school students who needed to get volunteer hours. So they came and worked. So we had extra people in addition to our master gardeners. We could never, ever have enough people for the amount of work that we have to do. In 2007, it was the beginning of a very interesting part in the life of Project Host Soup Kitchen Garden, because starting in the spring of that year, we moved the garden to my property near Paris Mountain. I had a 500 square foot garden in ground and raised beds, so we went from a very large garden down to a very small one and still had to produce vegetables for the soup kitchen. We moved all the tools, the supplies, the tomato cages, anything that couldn't be pushed aside in the Project Host area, and we planted spring, summer, fall, and winter of 2007, and some crops for spring of 2008. And after every workday at my farm, one of the volunteers or one of the students took the vegetables, and I mean, we're talking about garbage bag after garbage bag after garbage bag of vegetables that we harvested down and dropped them off so that they were at the soup kitchen for Monday morning. Why we did this was because the Project House Soup Kitchen building was being doubled in size, almost doubled in size, because they had a culinary school. And around that time, they were also, and I don't know if they're still doing it now, they were trying to do a start a catering arm, and they also provided food for after-school programs in some of the surrounding neighborhoods. So they had the opportunity to start some different things, and with all this space to have a culinary school, they needed to take a lot of our garden space. So basically, they let us work with them to pre-plan what we needed in space, what we could leave on site. So, and it was very good because my background is working with construction people, so it made a lot of sense. They understood we needed the irrigation picked up and moved, that kind of thing. So it was a very interesting process. Between October 20th and December 1st of 2007, we reestablished the garden area to over 2,000 square feet, tillable space in ground and raised beds. Our construction budget, the Master Gardener's construction budget for our part of the project, was $2,350. It doesn't sound like much, but I will guarantee you we got every cent worth, because that all went to totally new raised beds. We had to have raised beds because we doubled the size, the quantity of them. We did new trellises. We did a lot of things that we couldn't have done otherwise without it. This wasn't an operating budget. This was just for construction. All those raised beds, trellises, whatever had to be built was also built at my farm on the property and carried down there when we put the garden back together. The $2,300 didn't include anything that we already had, like the irrigation, which a construction company moved, like our fencing, and we had literally a semi of soil from Fafford donated to us. So we did not include that. We were very fortunate to have those contributions. The workforce of master gardeners that was needed and that showed up and did the deed for the new garden were 40 master gardeners that worked over 250 hours to reset that garden. And that meant bringing the raised beds down, for example, from my farm, putting them in place, then filling them with the soil times, 20 some odd raised beds. So it really became a lot of work. And I decided the Saturday that we did most of the work, late Friday night, that I was going to make lunch for them, and that too was a laugh a minute, but we had a great time, and everybody worked very hard. In February of 2008, that was our first full year that we planted at the new area, and we also added a huge variety of herbs, because now with the current culinary school rocking and rolling, they needed to do that, and I went down and actually taught classes on herbs to the people that were in the culinary school. 2008 also saw for all of our projects an interesting redirection into the fact that all of our MG Master Gardener projects had to have an educational outreach aspect to it. I was told flat out that it was going to be impossible for Project Host to do that. We were the first project that had a educational outreach event. It was called Grow Wise, and it was once a month, every month. We talked about year-round vegetables in the upstate. We had a lot of people. It was free and open to the public. We had some radio advertisements done by Bob Polanski, which was great because we couldn't have afforded something like that. We encouraged people to come early and actually work in the garden, and if they did show up, and obviously we could visually see that they weren't master gardeners, we would put them with a master gardener so that they were being taught as they worked. After the garden work was completed, we had an hour meeting that involved somebody talking about a vegetable of the week, which I know sounds pretty stupid, but when you learn that spinach is the most important plant for photosynthesis, and that at that point research was being done to see if that could be translated into the power that runs that phone that's taking this video. People listened, and it was a lot of fun. Also, it gave us the ability to get like 4 to 6 master gardeners to do something as part of this educational program, so it helped them gain hours and knowledge too. And then we always had a main speaker. Corey Tanner came, for example, and talked about irrigation. Confused me to death, but people literally soaked it up. It was very, very interesting. Of course, we had a big question and answer session, and we had handouts for the participants, always on something proactive. What's the next thing that you should be doing in your garden? Because if you find that you're doing things unsuccessfully, you should have been thinking about that 2 weeks before they actually ever happened. We did 8 events like this, and I can't speak for other projects and how their educational things went, but people stopped coming in the warm weather and frankly never really came back in the fall. We only had a total of 8 events. In 2010 and 11, after a long period, Crystal and I stepped back, and Gail Berry, another master gardener, became a coordinator of the project. In 2012, Keith McCaskill took over as a coordinator too. But by 2013, a large commercial greenhouse had been built on the property. It was I believe, part of a grant from Fleur Daniel, and it was on the last literally chunk of land that was available, other than if they started to tear up parking lots, maybe they could have had a little more, but it didn't work. So, and they were planning to grow vegetables all through the winter. And when they told me what they were planning to grow, I really couldn't believe anybody that was a person that ate at Project Host would want some of those vegetables, but I don't know if it's still, I know the structure's still there today. I don't know who is actually running it. Ultimately, within that year, the decision was made that Project Host would no longer be a Master Gardener project, and that the soup kitchen was actually going to take over the staffing and the maintenance and the ongoingness of that garden. In March of 2013, after 13 years, Project Host Soup Kitchen Garden was no longer a Master Gardener project, and our involvement with them ended.
So that.
Our main, when we began working with the elementary schools, our main school that we dealt with was Sarah Collins. I knew one of the teachers there, and it started a match made in heaven, and every year 100 Sarah Collins kids came through during a week-long period, and we would love to encourage more elementary schools. We have a few here and there and a few small groups, but it would take many more volunteers, and that is something that's been a little bit scarce these days. So if anyone loves kids, actually, even if you don't love kids, you'll love them after doing this, because it is just the wonder and excitement in their eyes when they see some of the things that we teach them. You just can't fathom how wonderful it is. So I would encourage anyone to volunteer with the Children's Garden.
And how would they do that?
They would contact either, there's 3 co-chairs that rotate the chairmanship of the garden: myself, Mary Jane Giziano, and Heather Collins. And we feel like we work very well as a team. We're very different individuals, but we bring a lot together to the garden. And so we would love to have anybody assist us. Normally on an average work day, we probably have a half a dozen to 8 to 10 volunteers that come. And we are very, very low key, very relaxed. We enjoy each other. And one of the wonderful byproducts of doing the maintenance in the garden ties into the educational part, is that you get to see one-on-one visitors in the garden. And very often they'll ask questions. Oh, tell us about this plant. Oh, I'd love to have this in my garden. How should I do this? What is this called? One thing that has really helped the Children's Garden, although we didn't think it would in the beginning, was all the added condominiums and apartments that have come into downtown. At first we were kind of worried. There was a lot of construction and noise and kind of disrupted our little habitat. But it has brought a wealth of folks that have just come through the garden, and several of them, I'll see them picking up trash or just really enjoying the space. And so that's been very, very gratifying. And actually, we're toying with the idea of maybe encouraging them to have a Friends of Linky Stone in their community, and we would help them, train them, and they could come volunteer with or without us. So that's something that was a wonderful surprise for us. The history of the plant sale, Master Gardener plant sale, probably started around the late 90s. That's my guess. The very first plant sale took place in the Firestone Tire parking lot on Woodruff Road. How that happened, I do not know, but it was very well attended. Plants, to my recollection, were dropped at the site. There was just a pricing committee that went through the day before and priced plants. Again, somebody else may be able to add to this equation. It was very successful. So a couple of years at Firestone, and then we realized we really needed more space, perhaps a little more structure than just out in a parking lot. and it switched over to McAllister Square, on the far side of McAllister Square. At that point, McAllister Square was not a mall anymore, and we were given pretty much free reign of a space, and part of it was covered, which was really helpful for volunteers and for shade plants. And we did that for a few years. And there again, it grew. They were well attended. We established a wonderful reputation, and people would line up at 7 a.m. It was like a girdle sale at Macy's. People were just ready to, and then they would burst into the room, into the space. And we outgrew that space. And at that point, we moved it. We got a shoe in to. Thank you, Jeff Lynch Appliance, which was in the old Lowe's on Roper Mountain Road. That had an area that could be locked up, so that was very helpful because we had to pay a guard to watch the plants overnight. So it kind of grew, and we grew along with it. We offered, we had areas where people could ask questions as far as, oh, look at this plant. I don't know what this is. Tell me how to do this. And we kind of trained master gardeners to promote those plants through education. In other words, have you thought about putting this fern in your garden? If you have shade, this is the best kind of fern. This one can handle dry shade, or whatever the plant was. And it was a great way to get people to buy stuff. They didn't know what they were buying, but they thought, well, this person recommended it, I better get it. So after Jeff Lynch, then we kind of were taken in with Roper Mountain Science Center, which really made sense because we have volunteers that work at Roper Mountain anyway. And to this day, other than COVID times, that's where it's been held. And again, it's grown. People show up early. They know that we're going to have it. They're ready for it, and it's been a great event and a great fundraiser for our symposium. This year, we're really excited that the plant sale is coming back after a few years off with the pandemic. It will take place at Jeff Lynch again, so we're going back to old roots, and it'll be at the end of April, and hopefully we will just have oodles of plants and lots of volunteers and lots of folks buying. We're looking forward to it. The supply of plants for the plant sale come from many different sources, individual gardens, and also there are times throughout the year that we have folks that volunteer their plants from their garden, but they're too many for one person to dig up alone, and therefore we have organized plant digs throughout the year, and we will have that this year as well in order to provide a great supply of plants. So if you're interested in participating in that, stay tuned, and there will be some information about that.
I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to talk about Master Gardeners. My name's Ann Friedel. I took the course and graduated in 1999. Over the years, over the last 25 years almost now, I've had the opportunity to serve as president of the Master Gardeners, symposium chair, headed up several of the events, including the night programs. But one of the special things that I had the opportunity to do was work on the special events committee. So I've had the opportunity several times over the years and got the opportunity to work with many wonderful people. Sadly, some of them are no longer with us. But over the years, we planned the kickoff parties. We planned what used to be called the holiday party, which was our during the Christmas season, the winter luncheon, and then the graduations. Some of my most favorite times were the holiday party because that was when we all gathered as friends and celebrated the holiday season together. And we always had the opportunity to honor our extension agent at that party. We no longer have that party, but maybe in the future we'll have it again. We do hold a kickoff party at the beginning of the year. Over the years, that kickoff luncheon, or now we've moved it to the evening, was either a picnic with barbecue that we held at one of the churches. I can't remember the name of the shelter, one of the churches. I think the first one we did was in a shelter at Cleveland Park. Oh, was it Cleveland Park? I know one year we did it at Falls Park. So we've had those parties. This year, for 2021, we were able to come back together. Of course, in 2020, we didn't have a kickoff party. We didn't have a lot of special events. My co-chair this year and last year was Lynn Price, and because of COVID, we weren't able to fulfill our obligations because we didn't have gatherings together. So we volunteered to do it again this year, and actually have volunteered to do it again next year. But we had a kickoff and had a really good showing where we had ice cream sundaes, we've had barbecue, but it's an opportunity to get everyone excited about the new year, learn about the programs, get introduced to who the officers are for the year, and think about the events that are going to be coming up in the year. So going back to the holiday parties, in the past we've had the opportunity to have some entertainment at those parties, in addition to the gathering of friends and having some wonderful food to eat. Sometimes we had it catered. At one point we were doing potluck where everyone joined each other. We also had entertainment. One time we had an a cappella barbershop group come and sing for us. Another time, and unfortunately we're still able to get back into that space, we had a flame eating guy come and talk to us. It was one of my co-chairs that I was on the committee with. Some may know him, Wilson Edson. Said, "Oh, I know a guy that can really do something great." Well, little did I know that it was what do you call it? It was Major Flame. And I'm sure that it was against all kinds of fire codes, but I really went into that not knowing that was going to happen. And a few people were a little taken back, but we all survived. And then I think we did have the Cafe and Then Some players come and entertain us. So we've had some wonderful times together. We always have a luncheon. Sometimes it was called the spring luncheon. Sometimes it was called the winter luncheon. Right now it's being called the winter luncheon. So that's moved over the years. In the beginning, I think one of the first ones that I remember attending was at the Commerce Club, if I recall right. We had luncheons there. We quickly outgrew that space as the membership grew, because our organization's much larger than it was back then. We were a smaller group. And we've had it at various places. This past year, January of 2022, we had it at the Poinsett Club. The year before we didn't have one because of COVID, but the 2 years before that, we had held that at Saskatoon. And we've had some great speakers. I think one of the best speakers I believe that we've had was 2 years ago. We had Rudy Mankey come and speak to us, and he was an amazing man. And the opportunity to have him speak to our group was both educational but also entertaining. Another event that falls under special events is graduation. So I'll start back to when my graduation occurred. So that was in 1999. There was a woman, I believe she's still active with us, Carol Lauren. She hosted it at her house on Lake Bowen. It was a very intimate gathering because we were a small group back then. And then for several years, we did have different people host the graduation at their house. I remember one was at Hetty Dreskin, maybe more than one was held at Hetty Dreskin's house. And she had a great field for everybody to park in, ample parking, but there had been rain. And so we had to get tow trucks to come and get people out of the parking lot. So there's always a fun events, but it was nice when we were a smaller group to be able to gather at people's homes, be able to share their gardens. There's always a swap of plants going on. But as the organization has grown, and I'm pleased that we have grown, we've moved to other facilities for those graduations. So the last graduation was just a little over a week ago. And it was a combined graduation this year for 2022 because the graduation wasn't able to be held in 2021. So we had a large group. It's an opportunity for the graduating Master Gardeners, those that are becoming certified, to bring a family member or members with them, and they're honored. They get their certificate as a Master Gardener for fulfilling not only their education requirements, but their volunteer requirements. So Greenville Master Gardeners have adopted a lot of gardens over the years, and we've supported Roper Mountain Science Center with the Heritage Garden, with the Butterfly Garden. And there's been some people that really stepped up. I think about Ginger. That Butterfly Garden wouldn't be there without her. She was so dedicated. I remember one time she was looking for a particular plant, and she also needed a host plant, parsley. And I brought her one little square of parsley, and she broke it into 4 pieces so there'd be more for the butterflies. So there's been a lot of people that really took a personal interest. They brought their skills to the Master Gardeners. Susie Seagrave, I think about her dedication of, I think she enjoyed starting plants, but what all she did for Project Host and that garden that we used to maintain there was amazing. But people also had other talents. So people that could write have come forward to be part of the Grapevine. I think about Amy Sutherland. She took us to get our tax status set up. Being an attorney, she brought those capabilities to our organization to take us forward. Then there was also Sylvia Skipper and her son Chip. They started our first website. So things have evolved over the last 25 years. Certainly in '99, we didn't think about having a website, but it wasn't without those talents that people already had, that they were willing to dedicate their time and volunteer to the organization to make us what we are today.